Lawson goes on to say, many scientists who are Christians believe, notice he said many scientists who are Christians rather than many Christian scientists, believe that before the great flood of Noah's day, there was no sea. But in the flood, the bottoms of the deep were opened up, allowing the release of great bodies of water, and the world was flooded. The oceans were then formed between the overturned land masses and the seas, became a barrier separating what we now know to be the continents, further dividing the human race. On the new earth, it appears, there will be no sea because the earth will be restored to its original splendor. But there would still be large bodies of water if this interpretation were correct. But let us go back to Ezekiel 47, which you remember very recently we proved was a new earth passage. Now, once again, it could be a new earth passage, and it doesn't mean every sentence in it fully applies to the new earth. We saw that in Isaiah 65. But here's what it says in Ezekiel 47. I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple. And then he talks about a man. He says, as the man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, this man appears to be an angel. And that's interesting with the measuring rod of Revelation we see in his hand. And he asked me, son of man, and he's talking to Ezekiel, do you see this? And then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. There you get the trees on the side of the river. The river goes down into the Arabah where it enters the sea. Listen, when it empties into the sea, the water there becomes fresh. The sea, the salt sea, which poisons people. That, again, as I mentioned before, people on a ship and they're dying of thirst and they're surrounded by water, and finally they give in and they drink the water and it kills them. The salt water poisons them. But the water there becomes fresh. So, if you had a large body of water that we would now call a sea, and that sea is characterized by being salt water, poison, separates the nations, people drown in it, great sea monsters that devour people live in it, whatever, all of that, and then all of the bad stuff is taken away right down to it's no longer salt water, but it's fresh. And remember, Ezekiel 47, a new earth passage. Could one then say there will no longer be any sea? The sea as we know it shall be no longer. That doesn't mean there isn't still a large body of water that doesn't have the poison and doesn't pose the threats. There will be swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. I think that is gives a great clue to better understanding because this is a new earth passage, and it's talking about where it empties into the sea. There's a sea in this new earth passage. But what's the difference? This sea is no longer what the sea has always been, in our knowledge, in terms of salt. Reminds me of the voyage of the Dawn Treader. And Reepicheep, the mouse, and hopefully how many of you have read the Chronicles of Narnia? Voyage of the Dawn Treader, where Reepicheep says, and it's in the movie also, where sky and water meet, where the waves grow sweet, doubt not, Reepicheep, to find all you seek. There is the utter east. And he said that this was spoken over him by a nurse early in his life, and that he's never forgotten it, and he's never fully understood the meaning of it, but he knows it relates to Aslan's country, heaven. That's where he wants to go above all else. And then when they get to apparently the end of the world and they're approaching Aslan's country and he's determined he's going to go on, everybody else has to turn back in the ships because the water's getting so shallow, and he's going to ride forward on his little boat, and if his boat can't go any further, he's going to swim And then because if he dies, he's going to Aslan's country. He's going to heaven. And then he's in this water at the end of the world. I tell you, the water's sweet, said the mouse. Sweet, fresh, it isn't salt. The king raised it to his lips, sipped, then drank deeply and raised his head. Yes, he said, it is sweet. It's like light more than anything else. That is what it is, said Reepicheep. Drinkable light. We must be very near the end of the world now. We must be very near heaven.